Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for coming along to Leg Up. I'm aware this is not amplified. This is for the live stream, which is being helpfully provided for us by Leon at the back, who is from... Leon, tell us where you're from. Learn for Life TV, which is hashtag L4LTV, who's very kindly providing live stream for tonight. And this will also be up on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/edugameshub, hopefully in the next couple of days. So I can see a few new faces. So if you haven't been to Leg Up before, I'm Martha and this is Kirsten. And Kirsten set Leg Up about just over 3 years ago, and it's now grown to, I think, 1,025 members now, which is kind of scary. We have an EduGames army. So tonight, we wanted to talk about things that go wrong. I know for me personally, some of the biggest kind of revelations and where I've learned the most have been in projects that have been total disasters. So I was kind of interested to find out what other people's experiences have been, and also whether it was possible to kind of make failure part of the process. So we're going to be talking about all that today. We've got 3 speakers speaking about all kinds of different things. First up we've got Alex Warren, who's going to tell us about his project. And just while you're swapping over to your laptop, Alex, I'll just tell you about the other couple of speakers. We've also got Annette Mays. Have I pronounced that right this time? Yay. From Coney, who are a sort of immersive, interactive, theatre-y sort of thing. They do kind of somewhere between games design and theatre, and it's kind of hard to explain unless you've actually been to one of their really impressive productions, but I'll let Annette tell you a bit more about that. And then afterwards we've got John Davidson from Canoti, who were a company producing really beautiful things in Brighton. They did various animations, and they did particularly recently Uplifted for Channel 4 Education, and then closed at the beginning of the year. And I'm not really sure why, and so he's going to come and tell us about that kind of journey and what happened for him and what he's learned from that. But first, Alex.
Right, hello, my name's Alex Warren. I'm a software developer. I currently work for Stack Exchange / Stack Overflow, which hopefully a lot of you have heard of, but I'm not here today to talk about those things, although that is quite cool, so come and talk to me afterwards. We're hiring. What I'm here today to talk about actually is what I did for about 3 years before I joined Stack Exchange. And that was set up this website here, textadventurescouk. It's all about getting people to create and play text-based games, also known as interactive fiction. And it all focuses around a bit of software that I'd been working on for ever since I was a teenager, actually, a bit of software called Quest. So what Quest does is it lets you build interactive stories. Now, a lot of people remember interactive fiction from the 1980s when choose-your-own-adventure books were popular, and a lot of people also remember the sort of text-based games like Zork and Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where essentially you're interacting with the game just purely via text. There's no graphics in this kind of game. You're reading and you're typing stuff in to solve puzzles. And yeah, so I've been working on Quest for about 10 years by this point, and sort of four years ago or so, I decided to see what would happen if I turned it into a full-time endeavour, see where I could take it. Now, it may seem a bit strange to sort of try and revive a sort of 1980s kind of game format back in 2010, but there seemed to be a lot of opportunity around that time. The iPad had just been released, and it seemed to me that actually finally technology had actually kind of caught up with the text adventure, because back in the 1980s you had to go into your spare room or your bedroom or hook a computer up to your TV set to play an interactive story, and that didn't seem a very natural environment to me, whereas people were now carrying computers around in their pockets and carrying ebook readers and things like that, and it seemed that there was actually quite a good potential there for text adventure games to make a comeback. In addition to that, people had started talking about getting kids back into programming, and this is the kind of the other main sort of strength of Quest, I suppose. It's not just a system for kind of reintroducing text adventures to the modern world, but also an easy way for people to make text adventures. And because they're text-based games, they're very easy to make. You don't have to worry about creating graphics and things like that. teachers were already using Quest in schools to, as part of getting kids into programming, because it's got a sort of simple scripting language that goes with it, and also it's just another way of getting kids excited about reading and writing. And the final reason why I decided to quit my job and focus on Text Adventures and Quest full time was that I was very bored at work. That's the kind of stuff. That was a productive afternoon, that before one of the regular sort of quarterly company meetings, which were very, very dull. I was surprised how well that worked, actually. So to see where I could take Text Adventures and Quest. Well, how was I going to make any money out of the thing? This is the famous Underpants Gnomes business model from South Park. Phase 1, collect underpants. Phase 2, not so sure about. That's to be determined. But Phase 3 is definitely profit. So how to apply this to Text Adventures and Quest? Well, I knew I already had a website, textadventures.co.uk. And I already had the software Quest, but what could I actually do with those things to actually make money from them? Well, there were various different aspects that I wanted to explore. I wanted to build up Quest to see what kind of software I could turn it into and what different uses could be found for it and that kind of thing. I also wanted to build up the website and the community, see where that could take me. There was obviously apps. What kind of apps could I build and what kind of audiences could I reach through those? Digital projects, so that is building games for other people, seeing what kind of organizations and companies might be interested in using Text Adventures in a certain way to do interesting things. And then the final strand of it was education, to see what kinds of products and services I could sell to teachers. Now, Quest itself, by this point, was a free and open source system, so that's why I had to have all these kind of things around it to try and make money from the thing. And I think it was important for Quest to be, at its core, a free and open source system. Many years before this, I sort of tried to sell Quest as a sort of try before you buy piece of software. And I think that puts a lot of people off from even trying to use, starting to use something in the first place. And these days, most people sort of expect software to be free. So that's why the sort of plan was to sell products and services around it. So I'll go through each of these sort of roughly in turn and talk about what went well and what went not so well, and then we'll see where we end up. So I started out with Quest. It was a bit of Windows desktop software, and that nobody was gonna get rich making Windows desktop software, even back in the dark ages of 2010. So I spent quite a long time making it into this web-based platform, which meant that anybody could use it on any platform without having to download anything. And that went quite well. It was quite a lot of work to do because I basically rewrote Quest entirely from scratch. But yeah, I think I came up with something that is fairly good, I think, and not too difficult to use, as evidenced by the number of people that use it to build games. The next thing I did was to really totally revamp the website and make it not just about Quest, but actually more about Text Adventures in general, and link to a lot of different online playable games. So that went fairly well. Here you can see roughly the sort of visitor count going back from July 2011 to the sort of present day. And I think if you think that's sort of like 12,500 back in sort of July 2011, in sort of 2.5 years, it's almost sort of 4 times the amount of traffic. But traffic obviously does not translate directly into paying customers, especially if you're not actually selling anything. Apps were kind of my great hope for kind of bringing Text Adventures to a wider audience. I was quite pleased with the interface I made for the sort of the app version of the Quest engine. It's very easy to use, just by tapping things. You don't have to type in a lot of stuff. That was a horror game that somebody wrote using Quest called Things That Go Bump in the Night. That's probably the most successful of all the apps that I put out. This, unfortunately, was the least successful. This one here is an interactive children's book called Filbert and the Broccoli Escape, which I thought was really nice, actually. The children's author converted a book that they'd written into an interactive one, and I turned it into an app, and I thought, yeah, there could be something here, actually, interactive bedtime stories for children. It got really good feedback. There's some friends of mine with like a 6-year-old kid. They really loved it, and yeah, I had good feedback from a couple of websites that reviewed it, but basically it did absolutely appallingly in terms of numbers of downloads. This here shows you all 6 apps that I've got on the iOS App Store and their total lifetime downloads. Now, these are all free apps, by the way. You can see the worst performing one is that Filbert, which has had a total of 497 downloads in total ever since I released that was about a year ago. So basically a complete waste of time. The best performing one, Things That Go Bump in the Night, only just over 7,000 downloads for a free app. Can you imagine if I'd tried to sell any of these apps, just the small pile of pennies I'd be looking at? It would just be embarrassing, really. So the next strand was the digital projects, I suppose. So one thing I finally got around to, after having spent about 15 years working on Quest, I'd never actually written my own game using it. So I wrote this game, Moquette, which is set on the London Underground, and kind of designed it to be a sort of technology showcase for Quest, to kind of show interesting things that you could do with a text-based game that weren't just displaying text on the screen. So it's got animations in it and things like that, and I think it's rather nice, you know. Animation, that's a sort of screenshot, that's all animated, that text there. And I think that succeeded in some ways, and that, you know, I think it's pretty good. But again, it didn't really, you know, nobody's really talking about, oh, do you remember Moquette, that revolutionary text adventure game that sort of really changed how everybody thinks about text-based games and really inspired loads of people to create them? That's not really anything you ever hear anybody saying. What was more profitable for me was actually doing a little bit of work for other people. So this is a screenshot here of a project that I did for a book publisher, which was sat alongside a book that was being published as kind of a marketing kind of thing. This was a really fun project to work on because basically I just did the programming for this and somebody else wrote the actual text of the game. And I thought, oh, it's good. I don't have to worry about promoting this because you know, you can see by the number of downloads I got on the App Store that maybe marketing and PR isn't my sort of strong point. I thought this would be a good project because the publisher is going to do all the promotion for this. This has been online for about, I don't know, since February or something like that, and I think it's had about 400 players. So again, you know, even if you leave the marketing to the professionals, it doesn't always work out. There were a few other projects I did for money. They were much kind of smaller. People that kind of came to my website and said, oh, you know, I'd like to make this kind of game with Quest, and can you help me by customizing it and stuff like that? So I made a bit of money there, but that's very piecemeal, very small bits of work. People that don't really have very much money and don't really kind of know what it is that they're building. It didn't seem to me to be a great kind of business move to make it really easy for clueless people to build apps and things like that. So that wasn't really a strong part of it either. Education, though, was kind of the main place I thought that I might realistically make money soon. Quest was being used in quite a lot of classrooms. I was getting emails from teachers. I did a couple of workshops. There were events like Games Britannia where I ran Quest workshops, and it was really inspiring and exciting to see children using software that I had built and just to kind of actually learn what kids are like again. Actually, I'd sort of forgotten how intelligent and creative children can be. I think, you know, it's very easy to kind of underestimate kids. So teachers were using Quest in the classroom. One of their main concerns was textadventurescouk. It's a publicly accessible site. People upload all kinds of things to there, and I mean all kinds of things, and not necessarily the kind of things that teachers wanted to direct children towards. So I set up this website called ActiveLit, which was I don't know why I'm talking in the past tense because all this stuff is still online and available. It's just I'm not working on it kind of actively so much. But ActiveLit is a site that lets teachers or any other kind of person running Quest and text ventures in a kind of class group or something like that set up their own kind of private area of the website where their pupils can come in and play from a list of games that the teacher has selected. If they create games, then those are not shared publicly with the world at large, but just privately there. It's really a sort of an MVP, though, a minimum viable product. It doesn't. I sort of had a lot of ideas for ActiveLit for what it might turn into, you know, feeding into things like helping teachers to assess their pupils by sort of tracking what they do on the site and what kind of games they build. But even though it was because of teacher feedback that I created ActiveLit, it didn't actually translate into teachers signing up for ActiveLit, even though it was free. It's sort of starting to pick up now, actually, kind of ironically. I had a load of sign-ups just a couple of weeks ago. I think possibly Rising Stars or somebody like that had mentioned Text Adventures in some pack or other. But this is kind of the thing that was, again, another reason why I set up ActiveLit, because I knew that teachers were using Quest, but I didn't know who they were. So the idea was to sort of provide that kind of communication channel. But it doesn't stop teachers from using the main website, and I could still see a lot of teachers were doing that rather than setting up ActiveLit groups. But it was ActiveLit that we took into educational accelerators to see if there'd be any interest there. So we applied to Emerge Education, told them about what our plans for ActiveLit might be, and obviously it being built on Quest, which was already being used by a lot of teachers. It was quite interesting to get their feedback, actually. Your product was more developed and had more traction than that of any other applicant to Emerge Education, and we were impressed by the user demand it has received. That's the first bullet point in their list of reasons why they would not be investing. So, yeah, I mean, your guess is as good as mine, really. The selection criticism main concern was a lack of clarity around whether your team had the strategic intent to take ActiveLit from an already successful product to a high-growth business. I still don't really know what that means. I put that on my blog, and I did get quite a good sort of bit of extra information from one of the Emerge guys. But even then, it sort of translates, I think, to them just kind of not really feeling it. I mean, I think, whatever. All they had to do was to say, yes, we think this might make us some money, and then they would have invested. But they didn't believe it could make them some money, so they didn't invest. And annoyingly, they have to give feedback, and so they have to think of something that's a reason to say no. But really, it's just a reason for not saying yes. Also applied to Nesta, didn't get any feedback on that, despite what they were doing at the time, the digital makers thing seeming to fit quite well. Wyra again said no. So really, the lessons that I learned from all of this, it was getting a good audience that was kind of growing, but that's not the same thing as customers that you're actually solving a problem for. Apps, total dead end. I don't know why so many people bother. There's millions of apps out there. I think it was at last year's WWDC that somebody from Apple said, with a smile on his face, that 75% of all apps in the App Store get downloaded at least once a month. That means a quarter of all apps don't get any downloads in a month, which is, you can imagine that there are so many apps that only get downloaded once a week or whatever, and poor. Digital projects, I found I didn't really like kind of scrabbling around, promoting myself, putting myself out there, trying to find these kind of projects and companies that might be interested in doing them. A lot of arts organisations and publishers, they don't really have a lot of budget for this kind of thing, so it just seemed like a very piecemeal way of just grabbing sort of small amounts of money, really. But fundamentally the problem, I think, with what I built was that it's a nice thing, but it's not actually something that solves anybody's direct problem. You can say yes, it introduces kids to programming, and yes, it gets them into reading and writing, but it doesn't actually, nobody is sat there thinking, oh god, if only there was a text adventure engine that I could use right now. Because teachers, they've got classes, whether it's English or computing, but Quest kind of sits between those kind of things. So it was good there were a few schools that do sort of enrichment projects where they take pupils off timetable and do, so a few of schools that do that kind of thing have done projects with Quest, but it's not really the kind of thing that sort of slots nicely into the national curriculum or anything like that. So you could look at it as something that was a waste of time, but I made something that exists, and I think that's actually very important. I speak to a lot of software developers, and especially a lot of software developers who want better jobs, but it's very hard for them to show potential employers what they've done. And whereas for me, it's very easy for me to show people what I've done, and that's basically what's got me my fantastic job that I've got now at Stack Exchange. But even if it hadn't got me a job, it is still out there, and teachers are actually using it still. And I think that's worthwhile. It is doing what I set out to do, but it's just not been something I've been able to turn into my living. And, you know, who knows what other opportunities it may bring. But finally, you know, what is failure anyway? I mean, yeah, you can say it failed to, yeah, become my career, but, you know, I've had a very interesting 3 years or so, and it's, you know, I've met a lot of people, and it's brought a lot of opportunities my way. And yeah, essentially, you know, when I was sat at work doing sort of fake kind of glasses and just kind of wishing I was doing something interesting in my life, I've addressed that now. I've done something interesting, and I've had an interesting life for 3 years, and, you know, it's brought me to where I am now, which is doing something that I really enjoy. And so, can I really say it's a failure? I don't think I can. So I regret nothing. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Alex, for your openness and honesty. Just before I ask if anyone has any questions, a couple of bits of housekeeping that I forgot. In case you missed it on the first slide, our hashtag is LegUp, so feel free to tweet from this. And we will be going to the pub afterwards, the Perseverance up the road, so please join us at that. Okay, anyone got any questions for Alex, or any stories of their own that they also want to share? Tom?
I was going to ask, I think it's a really good point you make about products at the end, you know, and there has to be like a direct problem for someone to solve. Did you ever try and find out if, I don't know, the DFE, and sort of talking to them, their music, their English people, like whether there was some way that you could modify Quest to suit a particular part of the curriculum, or did you find that basically, the curriculum is not really, doesn't leave any space for that, or what? Do you see what I mean? Like, did you see if you could tweak it towards a direct need?
Yeah, should I talk into? Yeah, I mean that's a good point. I mean, I think my sort of hope for Quest really was, well, at least there's kind of two ways you can kind of approach it. It's kind of top down and bottom up. And so I didn't really think that there was much success to be had in kind of approaching people at a kind of a high level, saying, is there some way of introducing this into the curriculum? If there weren't people at the kind of the low level, actual teachers actually building something and kind of, because I think it's one thing for me to kind of, go and say, oh, do you think there's some way I could kind of adapt this? But I think it is kind of, that sort of thing is actually better coming from a teacher who actually knows what it is that they want to do, I suppose, if that makes sense. I'm sort of waffling. But, no is the answer to your question. I didn't bother doing that because it didn't seem like I don't know. And how would you go about doing that anyway? I mean, you just send an unsolicited email saying, "Oh, I got this thing. Could I change it to make it something else that might solve a problem?" I don't know that would really get anywhere, really. So.
Sorry to butt in. Yeah, I mean, basically, what you need to do is demarcate, because if you think of the sort of whole thing of mice and men, the new books that have been dropped or not dropped, but sort of corralled away from the mainstream in education, they haven't even got time to do set books in English. So what you have to do is decide on which key stage you'd like to go for, and the time of year. And the best time of year is after the exams. This time of year now after this. Or those times of year where it's not so pressing in the curriculum, and that is better marketing in that sense. So that's the only thing I could say about that.
Yeah, but there has to be a sort of there has to be a product that a teacher might want to use kind of first before you. I mean, it's kind of putting the cart before the horse in a way, isn't it? It's kind of I need to work out which bit of education that would kind of slot into, and I didn't want to kind of make something that was that necessarily specific for any one bit of education. So I mean that's kind of why it's a failure, really, because it wasn't a product for English or a product for computing. It was just a more kind of general, kind of broad thing, and I don't know enough about education to kind of see a kind of an easy way of adapting it. I mean, it was definitely something that was kind of in my mind, because actively, I could have had different levels of that, or different brands of it, essentially. This is actively for English, but fundamentally it would still be a product that merged programming and English, because if you split those two out, then Well, if you just take the English bit of Quest, then without any of the programming bit, then that's just static stories. So that's just writing. And if you take the programming out of it, then that's just programming. And so the sort of the real point of it is bringing those together. It doesn't sort of fit into any one subject. Yeah. Yeah, maybe, and so maybe that's. But then, who knows how quickly that's going to be? And do schools pour loads of money into enrichment? Well, no, because it's not something that translates into exam results. So it's a kind of a silly kind of thing to kind of, yeah. Don't build a product for enrichment. It's pointless. That's my advice.
Well, it's very true, though. It is true. I mean, yeah, I agree.
Any other questions or thoughts?
I actually have advice. I mean, you just said about apps, not bother to build the apps. And if you just compare some of the successful ones, just simply, if you want to start driving, you just download app. I just paid for this because it they just digitalize book in a gamification way. So you just buy for £4. And it's worth it because it's already there. So you digitalize that kind of in a game way, so it sells. So maybe it's kind of should be applied for already existed market with books, already on the market. So you digitalize, play with it, people get something from it, so people will pay it. Otherwise, it's just you messing around with fields and people not ready. So
I think there's scope for people to build, apps for specific markets, but I'm not the person to build those. So it was really about people kind of having the idea and then wanting to use my tool to build their app for whatever their idea was. But generally, when those people wrote to me saying, "I've got this great idea, we'll split the money or whatever, or can I pay you to do this?" I would just kind of think, no, because that sounds terrible. There's, I mean, I have worked with people to build apps for particular things, sort of quiz apps and things like that. But yeah, I think it sort of tells you something whenever you get an email from a client who is saying, they'll give you money for something. If you just go, "Oh God, really? Seriously? Do you really want me to do that? You're wasting your time. I don't want your small amount of money for this. Please leave me alone."
If you could go back in a time machine to 2010 or whenever, would you do anything differently?
I'm not sure I would actually. I mean, obviously, if I went back in a time machine to 2010, I would know what I know now. So I would know not to spend time doing certain things. So I probably would kind of leave apps a bit. But then I don't know. The thing is, I don't know. Do I get to kind of come back to the current 2014 if it turns out that current 2014 is worse if I change history? Because if I can just go back as often as I want and experiment, then that would be really interesting, because it'd be good to see the effect. Because I think, although the apps didn't really kind of take off, I think the fact that you could build apps with Quest kind of inspired some people. I mean, actually, that was some of the schools that wrote to me were quite excited at the idea that their kids could potentially build something and have it turned into an app. I didn't really want to do the work to convert their games into apps, but the fact that it was possible, I think, was inspiring for some people. So I think even though the apps themselves didn't really kind of do anything, just the fact that they existed as a possibility, who knows who else was inspired to use Quest because of that. So it's kind of hard to know. But I'm very happy with where I am today. So I don't think I don't have any regrets. I'm a lot poorer than I was in 2010, but apart from that, I'm a lot happier.
Any other questions? Great. Thank you very much, Alex.